Yay! We're back.
You're the singer of the two of us. I really shouldn't try to do that.
No, I liked that. I liked that.
I appreciate it, but I still stand by my comment. I've heard you sing, girl, and girl can sing.
Or is your perfectionism getting in the way?
What a convenient way to throw that in for the title of our session. I can promise you in this instance, my perfectionism isn't. It is more acceptance of damaged vocal cords, but that does not mean I don't enjoy bursting out a beat, whether it's good or bad. It's more the energy of the moment.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But back to perfectionism, because obviously that's what we're talking about.
Yes, let's dive in.
So I recently had a moment of perfectionism, and it was so glowingly obvious, it was annoying to me. Um, and I guess it wasn't super recent, it was a couple of years ago, but it's still glowingly obvious. I was doing my first expo, and I was drawing on a whiteboard, like, win a free something. I don't even remember. And I couldn't make the letters equal in width or centered on the board. And I'm not kidding you. I probably tried to write that for over an hour, growing more and more frustrated. And then my mom actually came in to surprise me and help me with the expo. So my husband went and got her. And so she arrived like towards the end of me trying to be perfect. I was all excited, whatever, told her what I was doing. And then I proceeded to watch her try to perfect the same issue I was having. And she was doing the same exact thing. So it was a very interesting, like,
Ooh.
oh, that's kind of where I got it. Mirror. You know what I mean?
hmm
But I share the example because perfectionism, in my opinion, is a shield. It's an attempt to protect ourselves. And it can be as simple as having something centered on a board. Like, what did I actually think that was going to do? Do I think people are going to want to win something more or less based on the centeredness of something written on a board? Of course not. But yet, in that moment, that felt important. Weird.
So, perfectionism is something I don't really relate to. Not that I don't want to be perfect, because of course I do. That would be amazing. Um, but I think here's my theory. I would love to hear your perspective on this. I think that I was so average at everything growing up that I just like threw the towel in and I was like, all right, forget it. I'm not going to be the greatest at anything. And that I think has like helped me, I guess, not get hung up on trying to be perfect. I've just been like, yeah, this will do.
That's interesting. I mean, I think perfectionism is hard to define because what is perfect? Perfect is made up by each individual person in the moment, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what I hear from you when you say that is you might have understood it as I'm average, but it sounds like you were actually expressing compassion for yourself by connecting with your humanity.
Mm, okay. Yeah, I'm
Like,
not competitive either. Like I don't, for me, I don't need to do all that. That's too much energy.
see?
You were saying about singing, like you just are like, yeah, I can't really sing, but I enjoy it anyways. Like that's how I approached most things.
I mean, that's great that
Like,
you don't need to protect yourself with perfectionism, right? That's a gift.
I mean, it may have kept me from doing some things too, probably. But like, yeah, I don't know. So it's not, I don't know if I'm just not wired that way or if that's just how it went for me. But I don't feel the need to try to make everything just so. I don't even have the energy for it.
Well, I think that's the commonality in your experience is the energy investment in the perception of what perfect is,
Yeah.
which I get. And I agree with you. It's something I had to learn to let go of in my business. Like I remember when I first started, I was pulling all-nighters a little bit more than I should have in general. I mean, no one really should. Sleep's important, but I had this made up discipline in my brain of like, this is what I needed to do in terms of work, in terms of school, to build my business, to maintain my clients, and to finish school on the timeline that my brain had created for myself. So it was like me for me versus me. And part of that was me trying to be perfect. Like I had this made up idea that there was one way to grow a business. There was only one way to maintain my clients. There's only one way to finish school on that right timeline. And trying to stick to it wasn't possible in the hours of the day that existed. So I couldn't sleep in a lot of those times. And naturally, that sucked and made me super sassy, but also super sleepy. And almost, I view it now as how I was self-sabotaging myself. I was so afraid to experiment and try to be imperfect and still be successful that I'd rather kind of force myself to fail because no one can succeed perfectly if you're depriving yourself of sleep, right?
I mean, I think you could have stopped the sentence that nobody can succeed perfectly
Oh, I
because
for sure could have. Yeah.
one of the things that I enjoy about certain entrepreneurs that I admire is how much they emphasize the need for us to fail
Mm,
and how they view failure not as failure but as lessons learned.
totally. I totally agree. And that's exactly what I had to learn too, was like, maybe this is not how I'm supposed to do this. Maybe I don't have to be as disciplined. But as someone who has struggled with perfectionism, what really it's sourced in is fear. Fear if I'm not perfect, then I'll get in trouble.
Ow. Sorry, I got really excited.
Why'd you get excited?
That's one of the things that my clients have told me. Like, if I can master this task or this job or this whatever assignment, then nobody will be able to say anything to me.
Yeah. And that's the fear because I'm sure you know this, that like the most critical voice in our head is, or the voice in our head is the embodiment of our most critical parent, pretty much. So like what's interesting to me is we adapt into that based on the environment we grow up in.
Hmm.
And then once we're adults and our parents aren't necessarily being as critical, we now have stepped in to be the critical voice to ourselves. And like that's why I even brought up self-compassion, where you like accepted, I am human. I can't be perfect. I don't even know what perfect means or looks like. And quite frankly, now I'm with you on that. But uh as someone who experienced it, it really is just trying to mitigate someone not being loving towards you, which doesn't even make sense in the adult world all the time to me because it's not always about being loved, but it's about preventing pain. And
Mm.
that perception of criticism, whether it's coming from the outside world or yourself.
So, would you say that because a lot of my like one person that I'm thinking of in particular, her boss has told her, I don't feel like I ever have to discipline you or correct you or talk to you about something because I already know that you feel bad about it and you're already giving yourself hell about it. So do
Mm.
you think that's like part of the unconscious strategy? Like, ah, good. Now you're not going to say shit to me.
Yeah, it's a way of motivating yourself. If I'm perfect, then I can't get in trouble, which means I'm doing a good job. And pretty much when the spotlight's on you, you don't feel like you are doing a good job. It's like the old sporting analogy of like if the coach is yelling at you, it means you're not necessarily doing well. But if they're not attending to you, it's because you're doing what you need to do. So they're investing their energy in like developing the players that aren't performing as well. But some athletes can interpret that as like the coach doesn't care, when in reality, like you're just doing what they need you to do. What gets kind of lost in that, though, is the acknowledgement. both from ourselves or from the coach in that analogy.
So is acknowledgement something that you wanted as a perfectionist?
I think everyone wants acknowledgement. As a perfectionist, for sure, but in general, like being witnessed is one of the more important things in our lives. Being heard, understood, witnessed. And I always find it funny how at the end of the day, so many people run through their head with all the things they didn't get done in the day, but they never look at what they did do. It's like they expect themselves to do the things, but if they don't do one thing, they'll jump on themselves for it. But that if they do that thing another time, they won't acknowledge they did it. We learned not to celebrate ourselves or not to acknowledge or witness ourselves. We learned to shame ourselves into motivating good behavior.
Yeah, a lot of my clients say that. Like, uh, if I talk to myself harshly, then I'll get up and do the thing or whatever. And I'm like, is that how that works?
I mean, in certain people's brains, yeah. Like I remember I am competitive and I used to compare myself to some cousins or other like athletes around my age or community that were matching my competitive level. And I would think to myself, they're going to be better than me. You're not good enough, with like the narrative in my head to motivate me to try and work harder. It wasn't until decades later that I realized you can probably find another way of motivating yourself without breaking yourself down.
So what did you find?
Trust, faith, self-compassion, um, surrender, if I'm being very honest. Like, I don't think that I'm the greatest intelligence dictating how my life's supposed to go. Whereas when I was trying to be perfect all the time, I was trying to control how my life went. But I couldn't have planned where I am right now, like living in Florida, having my own business, being friends with you, which is fantastic. Like, I'm so
Like
grateful.
life's greatest reward.
Life's greatest reward, being your friend. 1,000,000%. I'm totally down with it. But I couldn't have predicted this years ago. I couldn't perfect my way here. And it was through just kind of surrendering to what is and trusting that whatever happens is supposed to happen for me, sometimes to strengthen me, sometimes to help me connect more deeply to my environment, sometimes to expand and be brave and face things that I'm afraid of. And when I just started to live instead of try to control, it really alleviated a lot of the perfectionism pressures.
I have a lot of questions.
Hit me.
Okay, first of all, where did you find this faith?
Uh, in a book, honestly, I read, what is it called? Untethered Soul.
Oh, I feel like you've talked about that one before.
I probably have because it really unearthed a lot of like perspective and perception for me to understand things. And he does a really good job of like helping you understand what's going on in your mind. And I remember like the first chapters, he tried to help you understand the distinction between your voice in your head and when you're listening to the voice in your head. So like when you're being the voice and when you're hearing the voice and how they're different. And it was a really intense spiritual book for me, especially at the time. So I could only read like one chapter a week, but then I would try to apply that chapter each week. And through that type of experimentation, and I was in my coaching course at the same time, I was subjected to a lot of like curiosity and new ideas that I had to explore for myself. And it taught me the elegance of surrender, but it was very hard for me to do that when I was stressed or scared. That was when my perfectionism would still come out. And then I remember when I created my first group coaching course, I was so oblivious to all the work it would take. I was like, oh, okay, I did all the videos. I'm ready. And then I told my business manager that, and she's like, oh, okay, great. Now here's the 87 things we need to get done before we launch it. And I'm like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? And all of them were like an hour plus. And she's like, you think you can get that done in 8 weeks? And I was just like, yeah, like blind determination came in me. I'm like, goal. Anytime you give me a goal, I like lose all perception of reality. And I was like, I'm going to go do it. And I found myself like an hour later at my chiropractor telling her about my to-do list. And I had like a kind of grounding moment. Like, who the hell cares about your to-do list besides you? No, no
Mm.
one, right? So I apologized to my chiropractor. And when I got in the car, I was like, what was that? And I just kind of like sat there for a second and I was like, okay, these are your circumstances. You are freaking out about the fact that you have 87 things to do in 8 weeks. But what are my options? Because that is my reality. And at that point, I understood the only power I had was choosing how I experienced it. What I discovered was the only methodology at that point that I'd utilized to be successful in stressful moments was through fear and shame, where I would try and be perfect, stress myself out, please perform, try to perfect everything, you name it. And I was like, okay, so I have a lot of evidence that like beating myself up and stressing myself out works.
Oh, beautiful.
And then I asked myself, is there any other way I could go about it? I probably sat with that question for 2 minutes, truly 2 minutes. And then I heard like a whisper. It's like, you could try to believe in yourself. And it felt so weird, girl, like so weird. I was like, what is this thing? Believe in yourself. What does that even mean? And I thought about it for a second and I was like, have I ever tried believing in myself? And I hadn't. And so I was like, okay, I guess this is the journey I'm on, experimenting, discovering. So I was like, well, we're about to figure out if that works because I got a great track record of like hitting goals. And I kind of knew I could fall back on beating myself up and stressing myself out to get there if I needed to, which sounds fucked up. I know, but it was very comforting at the time when I was scared. So I decided I was going to try and believe in myself. I drove home, looked at my picture of RBG, remembered what a badass she was, wrote my list, got to work, and I finished that stuff in 6 weeks.
Boom. Now, is that when you were pulling the all-nighters? Be honest. Don't lie to me.
It was not. It really wasn't.
Wow. So you were more productive being kind to yourself.
Uh-huh. And ever since then, it has been such a relief to believe in myself along the way. I just needed a little piece of evidence, but as someone who came from that place, like I share both stories around like the untethered soul because in the easier moments, it was very enlightening to surrender. But in the scary, stressful moments, that's when perfectionism really kicks in. And in my experience, the only way to really move beyond it is to be willing to experiment trying something new, trying a different way of motivating yourself or believing in yourself. But once I saw that my productivity and efficiency actually skyrocketed, I was like, shut the front door. Why haven't I been doing this forever? And
And
here we
then there
are.
was turning back.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right, next question, and I still have more, so don't
Okay.
don't worry. Um, what if a person doesn't have that like trust that it'll be okay, or they'll figure it out, or it always works out, or I forget what you said. Oh, that you don't know what's best for you, which kind of implies that the universe does or God does, or that I think that's why you use the word faith. So what if a person is like atheist, they don't believe in shit, and they're not going to be convinced that the universe has their back?
How do they move beyond it? Is that what you're asking? If that's their belief?
Yeah, what do they do with their perfectionism if they don't have that to fall back on?
Do something that doesn't feel threatening and experiment with it that way. So
Ah,
like
okay.
pour water with your left hand and make sure you can't spill. Like it's silly, but like if you're because the problem with not being able to have faith, and it's not even about religion, it's actually about evidence in your own lived experience. Like when I actually thought about believing in myself, it felt like the scariest thing in my life, if I'm being very frank with you. Um, but I had a great track record of achieving things I set my mind to. Given I had done that via stress and fear and perfectionism, but that track record was still something that I could fall back on. And I know we kind of joked about I knew I could go back to the shaming, stressful, beating myself up, but like not taking that option away actually made me feel safer to experiment. So as silly as it sounds, if you are someone who doesn't feel secure enough, don't know how to access the courage to let go and experiment, then I would say start with something very non-threatening to build trust in your own ability rather than trying to surrender to what is. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Yeah. Uh, Long and short, if I had to summarize, I'd say start doing something different and see how it goes.
Experiment. Like one of the things that I heard in a podcast the other day was like our brain's a predictability machine, right? Like we use our history to help keep us safe, to understand people's behaviors, understand how the world works, patterns, da 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 da. And we use that predictability machine in our brain to protect ourselves, to control our perfectionism, to limit bad experiences. But if we're always using our past to predict how to be, then we're recreating our past into our future. So the only
Ooh, that's
real way to
good.
create a new future is to experiment and discover new evidence and a new way of being. Otherwise, your brain will always rely on how it knows to be safe.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Uh, I was thinking about people who tell me my life has always been like this. Nothing good ever happens to me. I have bad luck, whatever the story is that people tell themselves. And in which case it would be very difficult to surrender and say like, oh, okay, I'm going to stop trying. But then again, like you're saying, if I keep doing the same thing that doesn't seem to be working, that doesn't make sense either.
It doesn't. But that still puts you in the same position of being afraid of trying something new.
Which I think most of us are, I think, because like you were saying, well, I don't know if you said it today, but you've said it in the past that our brains, our bodies want things to stay the same. When something's new or different, it feels very threatening. It feels
Right.
wrong. It feels bad. It feels like
Unsurvivable.
danger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So doing something out of the ordinary I use the analogy and I think you'll appreciate this one because you've seen me at the gym.
Okay, go.
Okay, gonna admit I'm out of shape right now, guys. So if I went to the gym and I just dove right in, my body would tell me this is bad. You should not be doing this. And it does. It definitely does tell me that. But is it actually bad for me to work out? No.
That's a great analogy, and I find the humor in it for obvious reasons, but also it kind of reminds me of one other aspect about how someone who maybe doesn't know how to access faith uh,
Mhm.
could go about it is redefining the value of bad experiences,
Oh, ooh, okay.
quote unquote bad experiences. To your example, when we exercise, a lot of people would interpret our experience to be bad. It's uncomfortable. We feel short. Like we literally go into a physiological state of stress that our brain would normally interpret as bad and negative. But because our society has taught us this is good for you, it's good to test your body, to condition your body, to strengthen your body that way, right? Why is it any different for the freaking mind?
Yeah.
It's actually not. And they're like, I'm a big Andrew Huberman fan. He has
Yeah.
a, okay. And he actually talked about a specific area of the brain that people who do hard things, it strengthens this area of the brain, which of course I can't pronounce, and helps you live longer and live more cognitively independent.
Ooh.
So
Wow.
to redefine the value of uncomfortable emotions, for instance, like no one likes being sad, at least
Mm,
no one I really know, but there's still value to the experience of sadness.
yeah.
And
I
that's
always like to reference Inside Out. Maybe
same
some of your clients
face.
haven't seen it, but
Ah,
spoiler alert, the first one to me emphasizes
yeah.
the need for sadness.
I couldn't agree more. But I think the challenge is a lot of us grew up in households with people who didn't know how to metabolize their own sadness, so they didn't know how to hold space for our sadness. So we were conditioned to think that that emotion isn't okay. And then we perpetuate that for ourselves and we try to escape it, not recognizing that it's significant and valuable. And so that resistance in feeling bad things to begin with really sets us up to fail.
Yeah. That's very true. And I like to bring in the yin and yang of life and talk about how contrast is important because, for example, if everybody lived within the standard deviation, I feel like life would be really boring. Like
For
we
sure.
could predict what everybody was going to do. We would all be doing the same shit all the time. Sounds horrible to me. So, I mean, and clearly I'm just embracing the mess over here. So,
Hey, we've talked about this. Your messiness is one of my favorite things. It welcomes my messiness, and life is messy. So let's be messy together.
well, I can't help
You
it.
don't have a
So,
choice anymore. I'm just here. I'm that friend who's just gonna like hang out and stalk your house. It's fine. Your kids love me. But the
that's true.
example I use with my clients is grief and love.
Hmm. That's a
Is
good one.
grief worth love?
Yeah,
In my opinion, yes, but it's impossible to love without ever experiencing grief.
very true.
Like, I think that's what's so hard for us is like our brain is wired to avoid pain. But what I don't think a lot of people recognize is we have an opportunity within the meaning we associate with emotions to define our interpretation of it. Like, why are we interpreting sadness to be bad? Why
Yeah.
don't we accept it as
I
neutral?
do get irritated that we're not allowed to call feelings bad or negative anymore. They're just difficult, but it is true.
I
It
mean,
is true.
I go to energy frequency lower because
Oh, look at you. Oh my
uh,
God. That's cute.
I'm skating the system.
Oh,
Dude.
love it.
Um,
Operate from a higher vibration.
yeah,
Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm with you. So I think like if you do struggle with perfectionism and you don't know how to surrender or access faith, be that in the universe or God or even faith just in your own ability or yourself, like regardless of what your old story is, if you can challenge your mind to question your interpretation, why do I think
Mm,
this is bad? Why am I interpreting this story to be XYZ? How do I know this isn't this? Like you can actually open up your own perspective and associate with different experiences in a different way.
yeah. That's one thing when I worked with teenagers, I don't have too many anymore, but I love working with teenagers and they're so funny because they'll say like, I feel like I'm a bad person. I'm like, what the fuck have you done at 15 to be a bad person? Please help me understand what's making you bad right now. And it's
Yeah.
always, something silly, but we do the same shit as adults. So one more question before we go.
Okay.
Um, so you were talking about the cork board, or well, I guess it wasn't a cork board, whatever the board was,
Whiteboard.
whiteboard. There it is. And you said, is anybody really going to care about the letters being a certain whatever? And frankly, I don't think people give a shit about most things. But my clients have pointed out to me before, because this is part of their story, that some people do care. And some people might look at your expo exhibit and say, oof, that looks sloppy. Or,
Mhm.
oof, looks like she didn't put too much effort into that. Or, ooh, that's what she's wearing today.
Mhm.
So how do you handle that with
I
the perfect?
would say, why is their opinion of you more important than your own?
Mm,
Because that's what we do, right? Like we learn to give approval of how we're being to our surrounding. And I mean, I get it. We're creatures of belonging. It's a primitive thing, blah, blah, blah. But, and I may have said this here before, Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness, really helped me understand and like break through this one personally of not everyone's for me. I don't like every single person, and not every single person is going to like me. I've tried to please, perfect, perform all of it to be what I think other people need me to be, all the while never being what I needed me to be. And as I shared when I first guest starred on your podcast, uh, that led me to want to kill myself
Mm.
because I was abandoning myself over and over and over. And it was the loneliest place I've ever been, if I'm being very
Yeah.
honest with you. Um, so I think I learned the value of showing up for myself and clarifying like who I want to be, regardless of how other people interpret me. If someone wants to interpret my, you know, imperfect letters as sloppy, I've now learned that means more about them than it does about me.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, let's put it right back on them.
And you and I can understand that, but I remember that at that moment, that feels like you're being rejected. But you're
Yeah.
already being rejected because you're rejecting yourself when you give that to other people who don't even know you. Why do
Yeah.
they get to decide who you are? You know?
And I want to throw one more thing out there. I know I keep saying that. Oh God, this is embarrassing. There are some people that I used to think maybe wouldn't wouldn't be someone that I would obviously think should be confident. And I'm saying should. Should is an unrealistic word, first of all. But maybe a person who isn't the smartest or isn't the cutest or whatever. And I'm like, where does their confidence come from? You know? And one thing that I realized observing this and asking that question to myself, because no, we do not ask that aloud. Um,
Love you. Never change. Oh.
uh, is that confidence has nothing to do with those things, and that those people who exude confidence, or should I say self-acceptance, because I really think that that's what it's about. Um, they are loved for who they are in all of their imperfections. Because I know plenty of people who are very popular, very confident, like it doesn't even
Mhm.
dawn on them to be anxious in a setting where I would think that they would be, or I thought they would be.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was the evidence I think that I needed, that you don't have to be perfect,
Mm.
be lovable, or to belong. You just have to believe that you deserve it, or that people are going to like you for who you are. I assume is what those people are. They must have had good experiences too to confirm that, like, yeah, you're good.
So that brings up two things for me. One is that wasn't exactly how I would define my experience getting there or recognizing I was there, I suppose. Like I had to discover my own acceptance. Like I had to learn to belong to myself. And that means like there were stories that people told me about myself that I accepted as true that I had to challenge and be like, is that my truth? Is that my experience? And I've shared this with you before. I don't remember if I shared this on the podcast or not, but I heard a reel years ago that one of the stories I was always told is that I'm intimidating. And you know me, I know me, it doesn't make any sense to me, but I heard it so much, I believed it. And then I heard the reel, it was the first line is, I'm not intimidating, you're intimidated. There's a
Mm,
difference. And
yeah.
as simple as it is, I was like, oh my God, that's what people have been trying to tell me for years is that they feel intimidated by me. It's not anything I'm doing. They feel insecure about how I'm being, like who I am, how I present myself. And you want to know what's funny? This is the thing I've learned about my intimidation. It's about my voice, predominantly.
Hmm.
And when I had laryngitis not too long ago, if you recall, the only way that my voice could come out is if I spoke a little softer, more like this. And when I speak like this feels really inauthentic. I call this my meditation voice. My normal voice, this, is what one might say is projecting my voice. I grew up in a big old Catholic family, and if you did not know how to raise your voice and be seen and be heard and be loud, you weren't getting food. So I learned to talk like this. But because I do, people interpret me as intimidating. That does not mean the same thing as I am intimidating, which is an identity statement. So I say all that to emphasize that part of me recognizing confidence was clarifying what I believe about myself and being okay with who I am and how I represent myself. And the parts of myself that maybe I don't love all the time, they were areas where my algorithm could be upgraded. They weren't unwelcome. I didn't shame them, but more, okay, I don't like how I can be defensive. I'm going to get to know that to understand why I'm doing it so I can try to be more loving because I don't want to be defensive. And that's what I've done. So whether you grow up in an, because the thing I don't like about the narrative is like if you don't grow up in that loving, accepting environment, what, you're fucked? No. You can create that because I think belonging truly does start with you and true acceptance starts with you. Like even what you said about being average, you accepted that you were average. Are you average? Depends who you ask. In my appraisal, you're more than average, but that's not your appraisal. Doesn't make yours wrong or mine wrong. It just is, right? So I think there's a level of self-awareness that comes with it. And the other thing, going to call in some Mel Robbins because I love her definition of confidence. She says, confidence is the willingness to try and the understanding whatever happens, good or bad, you'll keep going. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh yeah, then I'm confident because I know I keep going. I'm like the Energizer Bunny. You can't keep me down. But like, I also needed to learn limits and like, there's another side to that. But I guess to bring it back, confidence comes through experimentation, self-exploration, building self-trust, showing up for yourself. And I think that really does start internally by challenging some of the stories you have to see what's really true for you. And don't just challenge in like a question in your brain, like go out and experiment, get new evidence. And if the evidence continues to regularly confirm the same story despite you being different, then maybe it's true. And maybe it's something you need to accept.
Ooh, okay. I like that. Um, I think what I was trying to say earlier is just that I mean, I love the self-love and the self-compassion and the self-acceptance, and I do think that that's at the heart of things. I think that my point was just that when I look, I'm an observer. I love to observe people and environments and situations and even other people's conversations when I'm at dinner, whatever. Don't judge me.
Better.
Uh, so in observing, I realized that things that I thought we needed to be perfect in don't matter that much.
Mm,
So that was the evidence to me that you don't have to be the most beautiful person in the room to capture someone's attention. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be successful. You don't have to I don't believe there's any rules anyway. I don't. Like I've seen too much
yeah.
to believe that even with entrepreneurs, I mentioned earlier the entrepreneurs that I like, there's plenty of entrepreneurs and they all have advice for how you can do things. And I think some of it, I don't think that there's a protocol for success. And I don't think that you have to do things a certain way. And I don't think you have to be a certain way to have friends or to love yourself or to, I just I've observed too much, essentially.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I think the challenge as a former perfectionist is kind of what we said in the beginning, is that critical parent, that voice gets installed in you so you become your own tormentor. So even if nobody else cares, you're the one saying everyone else cares. And
Yeah.
if you're not willing to let go, if you're not willing to experiment, if you're not willing to get hurt a little bit, which is how we get stronger, then I would say maybe you need to look at why you're more comfortable perpetuating this state than being willing to bet on yourself.
Dang it. I need to find this Gary V quote. Because, speaking of quotes, because you quoted Mel Robbins, dang it.
Yeah, I got a couple sitting right here on the board. I can tell you my favorite acceptance quote too.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the great paradoxes of the human experience is we can't change ourselves or our circumstances until we accept what exists right now. Acceptance is a prerequisite for change. We don't like what we don't like. We just cease to be at war with it. Once the war is over, change can begin.
Mm.
That has brought me more peace in my life than I could ever actually articulate. Hmm.
All right, are you ready for Gary V?
Hit me.
Every single person here has shit. Nobody cares about your shit. They care about their shit.
Simple and true.
Yeah.
Can I close our quote off with one more?
Yeah.
Hmm. This one, I might have to repeat it twice because it can get a little tricky in the language. And I believe
Okay.
it was James Horton Cooley who said this. He said, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
Your smile says so. Yeah, but that's so true because I'm not who I think, or like if I use the intimidating thing, right? I'm not who I think I am. I didn't think I was intimidating. I'm not who I thought they were or who they thought I was. I was told they thought I was intimidating, so I believed I was intimidating. We got
Yeah.
to get out of everyone else's stuff and just create our own. It sounds so simple, but yet it's so scary.
I mean, I think all of life is like that. It's
Yeah.
all simple, but so difficult at the same time.
Isn't that the beauty of it?
I guess so.
Unfortunately.
The beauty in the mess. There it is.
So there you go, guys. Be messy, embrace your messiness. And if you're scared or don't know how to move beyond perfectionism, start really, 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 really small. Experiment.
I love it. I
Right?
love it. We can do small things for sure.
We can pour water with our left hand or our right hand if you're left dominant. Like just see that you can do things and learn to categorize the evidence of your small wins.
Love it.
The end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, listeners. Until next time.
All right. See you later.